Have you ever wondered how a family can appear completely ordinary just days before everything falls apart? On Halloween, Tiffany Lucas shared photos of her two young sons dressed in costumes. Like countless parents across America, she celebrated the holiday with smiling pictures and a cheerful message, "May the force be with you." To anyone scrolling through social media, it looked like another happy family enjoying another happy moment. Just 8 days later, both boys were dead. Those Halloween photos have since become one of the most haunting parts of this entire case. Not because they revealed anything sinister, but because they revealed nothing at all. Behind every smiling picture, there can be struggles invisible to everyone else. And in this case, one question continues to linger long after the courtroom emptied. Could anyone have stopped Tiffany Lucas before November 8th, 2023? This case is often remembered for the disturbing interrogation, the strange references to YouTube, Wi-Fi, and an unknown man named Parker Borders. But if we focus only on those moments, we risk missing the larger tragedy. The real story may not begin with the interrogation room. It begins with warning signs. On the morning of November 8th, 2023, Shepherdsville, Kentucky, woke up like any other quiet community. Neighbors were beginning their routines. School buses were running. Nothing suggested that one of the town's worst tragedies had already unfolded inside a nearby home. A neighbor suddenly discovered Tiffany Lucas collapsed outside, screaming that her children were dying. Emergency services were called immediately. While one neighbor stayed with Tiffany, another entered the house to check on the children. Inside, he found 6-year-old Maurice Baker Jr. and 9-year-old Jaden Howard lying on a bed with severe gunshot injuries. A handgun remained nearby. 4 shell casings were scattered around the room. Despite desperate medical efforts, neither child survived. Investigators quickly secured the scene. Ring doorbell footage, physical evidence inside the bedroom, and the timeline established by responding officers would later become central pieces of the prosecution's case. But even before detectives began asking questions, another question naturally emerged. How had a family reached this point? As Tiffany sat inside the interview room, detectives noticed immediately that her speech was disorganized. She jumped from topic to topic, often speaking about unseen threats instead of explaining what had happened inside her home. She insisted she loved her children. She repeatedly said she would never intentionally hurt them. Instead, she blamed outside forces. Video games, phones, the internet, YouTube. She claimed these technologies manipulated children and even manipulated her own mind. Later, she introduced another name that investigators had never heard before: Parker Borders. According to Tiffany, this individual had somehow influenced her thoughts for years. Investigators calmly continued asking questions. They did not argue. They simply listened. The more Tiffany spoke, the more they documented every statement. Throughout the interview, she denied knowingly harming her sons. Yet she also acknowledged seeing them injured before seeking help from neighbors. Detectives repeatedly asked simple questions about what happened inside the bedroom, but clear answers never came. Eventually, Tiffany requested an immediate psychological evaluation and stopped answering meaningful questions. The interrogation has received enormous public attention because of its unusual content. But perhaps an even more important question lies underneath it. What if these statements were not the beginning of the crisis? What if they were only the final stage? Court proceedings later revealed that family members believed serious problems had existed well before the shooting. Relatives testified that they had become increasingly concerned about Tiffany's behavior. Some described her as becoming more isolated and paranoid over time. According to testimony presented during sentencing, family members had previously contacted Child Protective Services because they feared for the children's well-being. Those concerns now carry enormous emotional weight. No one can say with certainty what different actions would have changed the outcome. No court concluded that any agency could have prevented the tragedy. But the existence of those earlier concerns has led many observers to ask difficult questions about how warning signs are recognized, and what happens when those warnings are not enough to trigger intervention. Cases involving mental health, substance use, and child welfare rarely produce simple answers. Professionals must balance parental rights with child safety. Evidence must meet legal standards. Concerns alone do not automatically justify removing children from a home. Yet after tragedies like this, every missed opportunity becomes impossible to ignore. The day before the shooting also became an important focus during sentencing. Defense attorneys presented surveillance video showing Tiffany taking her children to a restaurant before the murders. The footage appeared to show a mother spending ordinary time with her sons less than 24 hours before everything changed. To some viewers, the video suggested someone struggling internally. To others, it demonstrated how impossible it can be to recognize a crisis simply by watching someone in public. Either way, the contrast was devastating. Children who appeared safe one day were gone the next. Inside the courtroom, the defense argued that Tiffany had experienced a psychotic episode connected to opioid withdrawal. According to defense counsel, she was not in her right mind when the shootings occurred. The prosecution did not dispute that Tiffany appeared deeply disturbed during parts of the investigation. Instead, prosecutors focused on the evidence that could be independently verified: the firearm, the shell casings, the ring camera timeline, the 911 calls, the body camera footage, the interrogation. Rather than relying on speculation, the prosecution built its case around facts that jurors and the court could see and hear themselves. Eventually, Tiffany Lucas pleaded guilty to 2 counts of murder. By doing so, she waived her right to a jury trial and accepted responsibility under the law without requiring prosecutors to prove the case before a jury. That guilty plea fundamentally changed the legal proceedings. The focus shifted from determining guilt to determining punishment. For the families, however, the courtroom was never only about legal procedure. It was about loss. Morris Baker Sarr described years of heartbreak surrounding his relationship with his son. Other relatives spoke about concerns they had raised before the murders. Jaden Howard's grandmother, Regina Rowan, delivered one of the most emotional victim impact statements of the hearing. She described how completely their family had been shattered and spoke about the pain of losing another loved one after already enduring previous family tragedies. Another relative, Bobby Baker, addressed Tiffany directly, calling her the very thing children fear most. Those statements reminded everyone present that criminal cases are never simply collections of evidence. Every exhibit represents real lives. Every piece of testimony represents people who must somehow continue living after unimaginable loss. When Judge Rodney Burris announced the sentence, he imposed 2 life sentences. Before doing so, he reflected on the responsibilities of parenthood, emphasizing that being a mother means far more than giving life. It means providing love, protection, and security. He also spoke about the horror those 2 boys may have experienced during their final moments. The courtroom reportedly applauded after the sentence was announced. Legally, Tiffany may become eligible for parole under Kentucky law after serving the required portion of her sentence. Prosecutors expressed strong skepticism that parole would ever be granted. For many relatives, however, the legal outcome cannot erase what happened. No sentence can restore 2 young lives. No courtroom victory can replace birthdays that will never be celebrated again. So where does that leave the larger question? Why didn't anyone stop Tiffany? The honest answer is that we may never know whether this tragedy could have been prevented. What we do know is that relatives later described warning signs. We know emergency responders arrived only after the violence had already occurred. We know investigators documented statements suggesting profound psychological distress. We know legal arguments centered on mental health, while prosecutors relied on physical evidence establishing responsibility. And we know 2 children lost their lives. Perhaps the greatest lesson from this case is not about one interrogation or one courtroom hearing. It is about recognizing that serious crises often develop long before police officers arrive. Families may notice changes that outsiders cannot see. Neighbors may sense something is wrong without understanding how serious it has become. Professionals must make difficult decisions using incomplete information. Communities often realize the importance of early intervention only after irreversible tragedy. The Halloween photographs remain frozen in time. 2 smiling boys, a holiday greeting, a family that appeared ordinary. Looking back, it's easy to search those Halloween photos for warning signs that were never there. But the real lesson isn't hidden in the images. It's about listening when families raise concerns, taking signs of severe distress seriously, and recognizing that once a tragedy reaches the courtroom, every chance to prevent it is already gone. For Morris Baker Jerry and Jaden Howard, no verdict can ever change that.